Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Katie and today I am visiting the Jennie Wade house in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and I'm going to share everything about it with you. This is the tragic story of Jennie Wade. Jennie was a 20-year-old young woman living in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania during the time of the Battle of Gettysburg. She was the only civilian that was killed in the Battle of Gettysburg, and this is her story. The most ironic thing is that this house that is called the Jennie Wade house was not even Jennie's house. This house actually belonged to her sister, Georgia, and Georgia's husband was an officer in the Union Army. So he was not home at the time of the Battle of Gettysburg. He was not in the fighting there that happened. However, she was very pregnant and she ended up giving birth to her firstborn child 5 days before the Battle of Gettysburg began. And as custom was back then, Georgia and Jennie's mother and Jennie both came to stay with Georgia in the house to help her during those first, few days of being a new mother. Georgia had a very difficult pregnancy, and so they did not want to move her. She had a lot of complications, and so they had a bed set up in the parlor downstairs that she was staying in with her newborn son. So a lot of the people that lived in Gettysburg during the battle hid in their cellars to avoid, being in any crossfire. But they did not want to move Georgia because of her delicate condition, so they left her there in the parlor, and the family did not go down into hiding. The house was actually located close to where the Union soldier line was, and they had a well there at the house, and so the soldiers would come very close to the house, to the well, to fill up their water, to get water, and Jennie and her mom were trying to do everything they could to help the Union soldiers, and so they didn't have much, but what they did have was the supplies to bake bread. So they were making lots and lots of bread and taking care of Georgia and then feeding the Union soldiers bread. Now, the Confederate soldiers had actually set up down a little bit farther down the street at a different house, the Farnsworth house, which is still there. You can eat dinner there and actually stay there. It's a bed and breakfast. And the Confederate soldiers had taken over that house. Now, we don't know exactly what happened, but we think that they probably saw Jennie and her mom giving bread to these soldiers, and they saw that the soldiers were congregating around this house. And so they had snipers, and the Confederate soldiers were shooting at the Union soldiers, and it just so happened that unfortunately, a civilian was killed. We don't even know if the Confederate soldier who shot Jennie even knew that he shot Jennie. But what happened was Jennie was standing, it was very early in the morning, her and her mother were making bread for the soldiers again. She was standing there in the kitchen and her mother was sitting over by the fire. She was kneading bread at her tray, and they had the door that went in between the kitchen and the parlor propped open just for added protection, and the bullet actually went through the front door and then went through this second door and struck Jennie in the back and lodged directly into her heart. She died instantly. Her mother saw her fall to the ground, and at first her mother thought that she had fainted because it was July. It was very hot. They were in a hot kitchen baking bread. So she tried to get Jennie to wake up, get her off the ground, and when she saw the blood, that's when she realized what happened. Very, very tragic, very sad. Jennie's mother and sister both start screaming. A few of the Union soldiers that were close to the house heard the screaming and ran in to help. Obviously, there was nothing they could do. Jennie had died instantly. And they told Jennie's mother and sister, "You guys need to go hide now." And they said, "Okay, but we're not going to walk through that door." They were afraid of getting shot. So this is where the story gets interesting. They also did not want to leave Jennie's body behind. The mother was very adamant that Jennie has to go with them. The house that this happened in was actually a duplex. There was another duplicate side of the house. And upstairs, in between the wall, in between the two upstairs bedrooms on each side of the duplex, actually artillery had been shot through and was lodged in the wall. The soldiers went up there and were able to kick a hole near that, just big enough that Jennie's mother and sister could kind of shimmy through that hole. So it was a very small hole, just big enough for them to be able to crawl through. So they did that along with the newborn baby and Jennie's body. They wrapped her body up in a quilt and got her through that hole too. Then they went down the stairs on the other side of the duplex and out that door, which was on the other side of the house where the cellar was. And then they were able to go down in the cellar, which was a very small, cramped space. They had Jennie's body down there. They stayed down there until the battle was over. And then from there, after the aftermath of the Battle of Gettysburg, obviously, if you know anything about it, there was an overwhelming amount of tragedy that happened in this town that was, a small town. There was much more death than there was even people that lived in Gettysburg, and they were left with the mess to clean everything up. So there was nobody coming to help Jennie's family. And so, like I said, it was July. It was very hot. They needed to bury her quickly. So they ended up burying her in the garden. And then several months later, when things had kind of calmed down, they were able to move her to their church there in town and have a proper funeral and burial in the church cemetery. However, another tragedy happens. Several years later, the church decides to sell its property, and the new owners of the property say that all of the bodies have to be dug up and reburied elsewhere. They could not stay there. So the family then moves her to Evergreen Cemetery in Gettysburg, and that is where she is today. I went to go see her grave, and they have a very nice monument there for her. And a really cool fact is that there at her grave, there is a perpetual flag. I did not know this, but Jennie is one of only 2 women in America to have a perpetual flag at their gravesite, which is a very special flag that has special orders about it. It has to fly 24/7. And the only other woman in America to have one of these flags at her grave is Betsy Ross. So this is a very honor for Jennie and an honor to her and her dedication to help the soldiers, even though it unfortunately led to her tragic and unexpected death. That is the story of Jennie Wade. That is the story you'll hear if you go visit her house. It is a very neat tour. It doesn't take too long, about 45 minutes to tour the house. Unfortunately, they do not allow filming inside the house, so that's why I had to take still pictures to put together this video. But I thought it was absolutely fascinating to hear her story, and I wanted to share it with you guys. So hopefully you enjoyed this. If you did, give it a thumbs up, leave me a comment down below, and subscribe if you're new here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.